Welcome to the Bitcoin Basics podcast with your hosts, Faris and Gordon from CoinCompass.com, enabling you to safely buy and securely store your Bitcoins. All resources are in the show notes and description, including our disclaimer. Visit BitcoinBasicsPodcast.com to subscribe and discover other free content.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, everyone. Where you're listening to this, the Bitcoin Basics podcast with your host, Gordon, that's me, and I have Faris with me. Before I get to Faris, just a quick recap. We had a look at altcoins, otherwise known as shitcoins, in our last episode. So if you haven't listened to that, because we go into great detail, have a listen to that. I'll link the link in the description show notes. So today we're looking at Bitcoin myths and FUD. This is our 6th part of 7 parts of our Bitcoin Begins series. And I'll ask Faris by saying, most people say Bitcoin's not real. You can't touch it. You can't smell it. You can't feel it, do anything, unlike gold. Therefore, Bitcoin's worthless.
So yeah, this is a question I have to answer or explain to depending on your demographic. So if you are a baby boomer, this is something I'll definitely have to talk to you about. If you are a millennial, not an issue. Millennials these days can order a taxi, order food via an app. So for them, their world exists on their smartphone. With baby boomers and older generations, this is something that, hang on, with gold I can buy, I can hold it in my hand. With money, I can get it out of the ATM. So that, again, in explaining this, I actually have to explain to them, money itself. So the money that you have in your bank account is not real. Banks do not actually hold what you have in your bank account in reserve. They lend it out to other people, and there's more money, in digital form than there is in cash form in the real world. So when you explain to them that, then they understand a bit more. And the same thing goes if you're buying shares. How many people go, okay, I'll buy shares of Apple. That makes me a shareholder. Are you actually going to go to the AGM? Are you actually going to look at sales reports? Are you going to go to the factories and say, I want to see proof that you've printed so many millions, or that you've created so many millions iPhones? So it is just, a misunderstanding of not just Bitcoin, but finance itself.
Faris, you said something amazing and unbelievable, and I don't believe you. So when I go to the ATM and I withdraw $200, or even say, for example, I transfer $200 using my internet banking. So for example, I'm transferring 200 Australian dollars to you. I assume there's some guy, maybe some intern, 18 years old, fresh out of high school. He goes down to the bank vault, in the recesses of the bank, and he looks at all the pallets of cash, and he moves $200, and maybe you've got a different bank, so I don't know how they transport it on secure trucks or whatever. And then the next night or the next day or whatever, that money then moves from my bank to your bank. Isn't that how things work?
No. So obviously with that, it's money just moved around from one account to another. And with that, when I say one account to another, so if you were to deposit $20,000 into the bank, I will then borrow $200,000 to buy a home. Now, that $200,000 I'm borrowing actually is not cash kept in the bank anywhere. It's, fractional reserve, it's what it's called. So, and there, we can link a chart onto this where you can see there is X amount of cash, so physical money that you can hold in global circulation, which is minuscule compared to what is technically on bank balance sheets. Minuscule compared to it.
Yeah, it's funny we have to explain this, and I kind of get it. It is perhaps a generational thing. You can hold a gold bar or you can hold cash in your hand, and that's something of value. But nowadays, as you said, most money, it's numbers on a screen. We don't actually touch physical cash. And in this day and age, I doubt we're going to ever touch physical cash again. So we're talking about intangible assets. We're talking about ideas. And I mean, you look at some things, trademark, copyright, patents that companies have, they're extremely valuable. Companies pay millions of dollars for these things. You can't touch a trademark or an idea or a patent. And that's why people spend millions of dollars protecting their intellectual property. So yeah, we're talking about abstract concepts, intangible assets. Just because you can't touch it doesn't mean that it isn't valuable. And I would argue that the most valuable thing in the entire world is an idea, and ideas remain in heads, and there's something that aren't actually physical. So, okay, we've debunked that, unless you've got anything else on you can't touch it, therefore it's worthless.
Well, the only thing I do want to add to that is currently there is no derivative trading of Bitcoin. So, for example, I've got the numbers in front of me. Physical money in the world right now is about 34 trillion US dollars. That's cash in vaults around the world or in banks around the world. However, when you add what the derivatives on top of that, it's well closer to $100 trillion. So you've got $100 trillion house of cards stacked upon physical money of $34 trillion. Now, with Bitcoin, it's 1-to-1. The amount of Bitcoin in the world is actually what you see is what you get. There's no dark pools. There's no hidden money anywhere. That's basically one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. You don't have this leveraged or stacking on top of it that you see in financial markets.
Great point, Faris. And Faris mentioned a word, fractional reserve banking. That's when, for example, a bank has $1,000, but they loan out $5,000 to 5 different customers, but they only actually have $1,000. So they're creating this debt, this credit.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
Okay, Faris, the next one, which I hear all the time, probably in the last 5-6 years, there's been, we did an episode on how Bitcoin's dead and Bitcoin's in a bubble. People constantly say Bitcoin's in a bubble. I say gold's been in a bubble for 5,000, 8,000 years. Is Bitcoin in a bubble?
So it depends on what is your definition of a bubble. So for example, a lot of people are saying that at time of recording, we're at the end of 2020, the stock market is in a huge bubble because they're using metrics like cap ratios and price to earnings. And it is in the biggest bubble we've ever known, beyond 2008, beyond 2000.com. With Bitcoin though, how do you value that as a bubble? Because we know how many are going to be created. We know how many will be created. We know how they're going to be released. I would say Bitcoin goes through bubbles in sentiment, in that people are rushing to buy into Bitcoin, and you get that FOMO, that fear of missing out. So yes, Bitcoin does go through these FOMO bubbles, and it's gone through them several times. But how do you actually say it is in a financial bubble where you can't? Because if we were to say that the amount of money that goes into gold would go into Bitcoin just by inflows of funds, people buying gold, if those same amount of money went into Bitcoin, then each Bitcoin would be worth about 500,000 US dollars per Bitcoin. And it's not that. So by that metric alone, even that, we know how many Bitcoins are going to be released. We don't know how much gold there is in circulation still. There could be more that they unearth. So sentiment bubbles, yes, Bitcoin will go through many sentiment bubbles. But how do you put a metric any other way?
Yeah, good point. Bitcoin is in a bubble. It prints 6.25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin blockchain. Not really comparable to the Federal Reserve that are printing trillions of dollars, and Bitcoin has a cap supply of 21 million. So it's not really comparable. Our last and final piece of FUD that we're going to debunk, which I hear all the time, Bitcoin is like MySpace, and another altcoin is going to take over, just like MySpace lost, or whatever social network, and now Facebook is the winner. Bitcoin will be overtaken by a better, faster, insert your adjective here, cryptocurrency. Faris, is Bitcoin going to die? Well, is it going to be dethroned?
This is something I wanted to ask you, Gordon. So the one thing I enjoy about Bitcoin, or I really appreciate, is the supply and demand properties. We know how much supply there is in Bitcoin. And to me, that's from an economic perspective, that's what I appreciate, supply and demand. From a technical perspective, this is what I wanted to ask you. Are there coins out there that can potentially offer a service or product that Bitcoin can't offer and that will be a Bitcoin killer?
Oh, you mentioned two things. Are there other coins that can do something better than Bitcoin? Yes, absolutely. For example, let's just look at the top three coins, Bitcoin, Ripple, and Ethereum. Ripple is faster. Sorry, Bitcoin fans, Ripple can do 10,000 transactions a second. Bitcoin can only use 7. Come on, Bitcoin, that's pathetic. Ripple is faster. Ethereum, for example, can do a little bit more transactions a second, but Ethereum can do all kinds of complicated things, decentralized finance, smart contracts, and etc. Bitcoin is slow. Bitcoin is boring, but that's by design. So Bitcoin does one thing, and that's hard money, store of value, and it does it really well. I just looked on CoinMarketCap, and there are currently more than 3,900 altcoins. And if we look at the last 5 years ago, so for example, the top 5 the top 5 cryptos at the moment, Bitcoin, XRP, Ripple, Tether, Link, and Ethereum. If we look even just 5 years ago, the top 5 was Bitcoin, Litecoin, Purecoin, Namecoin, and Feathercoin. So even in the period of 5 years, most of the coins don't even exist anymore. So is it possible that another coin takes over? Yes, anything's possible. It's extremely unlikely for what Faris mentioned. Bitcoin has a supply of 21 million. It is decentralized, which means it can't be controlled by a government or anything like that. And it's the most secure hard money system that we've ever had because we've got the smartest people working on it. It's got the biggest network. It's got a network effect. It was the first one. Copies have come and gone. Coins have come and gone saying this is the Bitcoin killer. But in the end, Bitcoin stands because, well, of all those reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, I agree for the same reason, Gordon. And I've looked at altcoins, but at the end of the day, I mean, we're coming from different perspectives. I understand the blockchain aspect. I appreciate the economic aspect of what Bitcoin has to offer.
Well, actually, I understand the economic aspect. It's the best store of value, and that's what it comes down to for all those reasons, even technical that I mentioned.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, without further ado, that concludes part 6 of our 7 in our Bitcoin Begins series. We're going to have a look at what's next, our final chapter. And thanks, Faris. Any concluding thoughts or observations about Bitcoin and FUD?
Buy Bitcoin.
Thanks for watching or listening. Please visit coincompass.com/free to register to our socials and discover other free content. Subscribing, liking, and following helps this content remain ad-free. Until next time.